Good morning, Milena. Good morning, everybody. Do you see my full presentation, or you just see?
We see your presentation here on it is on in front of us, and we
Okay.
see. Yeah.
All right, let's go. So yeah, first of all, I'm sorry I cannot be in person with Belgrade. I have very fond memories of the previous event 2 years ago when I was presenting some rather different story. It was about particle pollution due to fireworks at the football event. However, and actually this story triggered the research I'm going to present you today, because in March last year, some colleagues of mine who work in medicine, they asked me, Anton, we remember you did some research on particle monitoring recently. So would you be able to test with your equipment some of our improvised face protection? Because, you know, with the pandemic started, and the masks were the first line of the defense pretty much against transmission of infections. So we said, yes, sure, we can assemble some setups, we can test some things, and then the research continued and span over about a year or so. Obviously, first of all, I have to stress that it was a big group of people involved in this research, so I list them here as a co-author. So most of them are from Joseph Stefan Institute, but they're also from hospitals and from a company that deals with vacuum cleaners, actually, which is a part of how we got some of the equipment we are using in the study. So some pictures. What we have is there's my Christmas tree from last year. I'm kind of joking, but yes, masks everywhere, masks, so many different types of masks. The important thing, which I believe, is that we back last year in spring, there was not much knowledge about masks. So the general population did not know what kind of masks we have, how they work, why they work. Are they dangerous? Are they okay? Do we have to replace them? How to handle them? And so on. So apart from doing the basic research on filtration property of the masks, we also engaged quite a bit into dissemination of knowledge. So we gave a bunch of interviews for television, and I even presented some of our work.
Can you please share your screen, because we are not we're seeing still the first slide. Sorry.
Right. Yeah, this is what I was wondering. Let's see. I'll stop share.
It's needed to be full screen. Yeah, it is
yes,
okay
yes,
now.
Yes. So I'll do it like this. Let's see. Yeah, now you see it. Okay, yeah, so as I said, this is kind of, I was joking, this was my Christmas tree for last season. And yes, we did a lot of outreach for the media, like giving statements for television, and even the government press conference telling about masks. So this was in January. We got the cover of Joseph Stefan Institute news, which well, it was kind of the current topic. So mannequin head with different face masks, which you will hear more about later. And we hope that we contributed to a general awareness to some degree. So, okay, yeah, here we go. So the next slide, which we pretty much heard all about in the previous talk, which was very insightful for me as well. So essentially, when we are wearing masks, we are reducing the transmission. If everybody is wearing masks, we are reducing transmission even further. So now I focus on the masks. What kind of masks do we know? So we group them into two groups, I will say. So one group is medical and other masks that are certified. So this is personal protection equipment. And the other one is non-medical masks. So the personal protection equipment, these masks are surgical masks. These are FFP2 or N95 or KN95. So these are European, American, and Chinese standard. And then the next level, even better, is FFP3 or N99 or N100. Then we have gas masks, which are even better. They cover the face. And then we have the kind of the hazmat suits, which doctors dealing with infected patients use. Obviously, these masks are not only used in medical setups. Several of these masks are used, let's say, in industry when dealing with metals or wood or paint or things like this, where you have particulate matter in the air that you have to filter out. On the other hand, non-medical masks include, for example, hygienic masks, cloth masks, they're like homemade, and whatever mask you get. So these were the improvised masks that my friends, medical doctors, were trying to use. However, not all of those masks would be a good idea. So you see on the bottom corner, there is a snorkeling mask, full face, where we put a filter on. And those were rather popular last spring, at least on the social media, because there was a severe lack of FFP masks. So the idea is then you just replace a filter and you wash the snorkeling mask, and then it works. However, we demonstrated that those are really problematic because of CO2 retention, because they have a large orinasal space, so the way you're breathing, the CO2 just starts to increase. So maybe it's not the best idea for extended periods of time. Gas masks, however, don't have this problem because of the design. So what we learned is why do we use a face mask, how do we handle the masks, and what are the mask standards. So on the picture on the right corner, you can see different masks and different standards and how these standards are monitored. They really depend. So, for example, surgical mask, the intention of surgical mask is to act as a barrier. The main use of it is when a medical doctor is operating on a patient, so it prevents the doctor to spread the aerosol droplets in the, let's say, in the open thorax of the patient, and in the other way, there is some body fluid that it does not come into the doctor's mouth. So such a mask has to be splash resistant. But the other important aspects of these masks are they have to allow the wearer to breathe, and they have to be biocompatible. For surgical masks, the filtration is not the most important part because, as I said, they act as a barrier. However, if you look at the FFP masks, so face filtering respirators, they also have to have the filtration properties. So for FFP2, it's 95%. For FFP3, it's 99% of aerosol filtered. Again, this depends on the particle size, and so there is different sizes, but this is like a general number. There are different ways how they test it. In some cases, they're using silicone droplets. In some cases, they're using sodium chloride. And there are also methods to see, to use the viruses. Okay, my voice is back. To use viruses and bacteria, but they are not that ubiquitous yet. So, filtration mechanisms. I think I should spend a slide on this one. There are different mechanisms how FFP masks filter the particles. So one would naively think that this is a kind of a sieve, so it has a small holes, so particles do not pass through these holes because they are too small. However, this is not the case. The most obvious argument is that if the holes were so small, you would not be able to breathe because the airflow would be just too tiny. But there are different mechanisms. So one is the inertial impaction. So we have the mask consists of very fine fibers, and it's a non-woven mesh typically. So now I'm talking about FFP masks. They are of these fine fibers that are made of electrolyte material, which is, for example, polypropylene. And simply, the most easy way is that the particle will impact one of these fibers and will stuck to it. Then the other way is the interception. So you have fiber, and then the particle goes, crosses, and then it still hits it. Then you have diffusion. So this is Brownian motion, moving, and eventually hitting it. And there's another one. Particles, aerosol particles are typically charged, and electret fibers are also charged. So it's diffusing, but because there is electrostatic interaction, it will also stick to the fiber. So the impaction and interception mostly work for particles above 1 micrometer, while diffusion and electrostatic attraction mostly works for particles below 500 nanometer. And I will show you how this proves on our experiments. So what we did, now I will go to the experiments. You already saw the mannequin head, which we got from the robotics department. We placed it in the chamber, which was designed originally to test the performance of vacuum cleaners. And we used the we used aerosol generator Topaz. And we use science-sensitive nanoparticle detector, which is scanning mobility particle sizer by TSI. So this is the schematic of the diagram. We have the head inside the chamber. We provide aerosol generated by the generator, which is quartz powder with a wide particle distribution. And we have a nanoparticle detector, which looks at the different sizes of particles that get through. We put first we kind of established the baseline without the face masks, and then we put the face mask on, and you see the total concentration drops. And then by comparing the baseline and the performance with the face mask, we can see how good the performance of particular mask is. How am I with time? Okay. We tested several different fabrics and some improvised devices. So now I will show you some results. We also looked at images with a scanning electron microscope. So these are some of the textiles that we looked, and these are the FFP fibers. So you see, these are very fine fibers, and on this one you can see how aerosol parts, they get stuck to this fiber. So I'm kind of kidding, this is kind of a spaghetti image. Okay, now some results. So we have tested different setups. So one is we use the masks, the other one we use just the fabric, because even the FFP mask consists of several layers. So one of these is a filtering layer. So we can see that the performance of the filtering layer is pretty much close to 100% at all sizes, whereas the mask itself is slightly worse. And this is because the mask does not stick to the face ideally, so there is always some leakage. Then for FFP2, I'm showing here the performance of individual layers. So you see the filtering layer has the almost 100% filtration efficiency, whereas the other layers are mostly for structural integrity and so on, and they're not intended for filtering, so they are not as good. Next plot is different fabrics of different surgical masks. So these are commercial surgical masks off the shelf, and we can see that there are significant differences between these masks. Some of them have performance very close to like above 95%, whereas the other ones are not as good. So even not all these surgical masks are the same. But of course, one should be aware that even if the fabric itself is close to 100%, surgical mask is not designed to fit the face perfectly, so there is always some leakage likely. And the last one on this plot is for the 5 different textiles. So we looked at different poplins and tetra fibers, and we can see poplin is better than tetra. Tetra is actually very bad, but there is even one poplin fabric, so these are all cottons, which is again not good. We also tried inlet, which is an even more dense fabric, but that one actually is so dense that you cannot breathe through properly. There were some cases of parents complaining, my child is wearing a face mask and cannot breathe. And then we ask him what kind of mask it is. And they say, 4-layer cotton something. And I say, well, maybe it's, maybe you actually cannot breathe because it's too dense, the mask. Eventually we stick back to surgical masks are fine. FFP masks are fine if you are in a more, let's say, more risk environment. The last plot here is the comparison of snorkeling mask and gas mask. So snorkeling mask is quite okay here, but for larger particles, less so, probably again because of leakage, whereas gas mask is perfect. So this is like a professional gas mask used by the army. And yeah, we tested that it really works really well. These two bottom plots show that we were also measuring time dependence. So we have, one should note that this is not the actual situation when you are outside walking around with a mask, because the aerosol concentration in our experiment is much higher than you would get just walking outside or indoors, I mean, wearing a mask. So we can see that what's relevant. Gas mask, all time the same. FFP2 and 3 mask slight decrease. This is because, again, some leakage shows. And for surgical masks, there is also some leakage which just accumulates with time. Just looking at fabrics, the interesting thing here is the poppling fabric, which actually increases particle removal efficiency with time, but clearly this is the case of the clogging, because more and more material accumulates on the fabric and blocks the incoming air. So here are some numbers, but this is pretty much what you've seen on the plots already. The second story we did is we tried to sterilize face masks using ionizing radiation. So this idea came from our colleagues at the nuclear reactor. We have an experimental nuclear reactor at Joseph Stefan, and we tried to sterilize FFP2 and FFP3 masks by two means. One was using gamma rays at nuclear reactor, and the other one was using an electron beam at the commercial facility. So why is this good? This is because there was a shortage of FFP2 and FFP3 masks. So if you are, let's say, if you are a big hospital which collects these masks in large numbers, then we just send them to be sterilized, and then you can use them again, maybe once or twice. So this is what we wanted to investigate and how the performance changes. So yeah, we wanted to see the filtration efficiency, and we also had to check the surface charge, which is important because, as I mentioned before, one of the important mechanisms for filtration is the electrostatic interaction between the particles and the fibers. So this is how the performance is. So for FFP2 mask, this is the non-irradiated, and then electron beam and gamma rays without recharging. So you see that the particle removal efficiency drops considerably, especially for this particle size. And as we checked, pretty much when you irradiate the fabric, the surface charge goes away. So we had to recharge it back, and you see the particle removal efficiency improves significantly again. It's not the same as it used to be before the irradiation, but it's quite decent, I would say. I mean, this is not standard, but again, this is emergency case when you don't, where you have either this kind of mask or no mask, or I mean, lower grade mask. So for this purpose, it's quite okay. So if for FFP3, it's quite similar. If you look, so this is the mask before irradiation, and then we use 10, 20, and 50 kilo gray. And if we recharge it, the performance goes quite back. And interesting enough, regardless whether we charge it with positive or negative charge. So we conclude that this is possible with maybe up to 2 sterilization before the mechanical properties of the mask deteriorate too much. Eventually it becomes brittle and it falls apart. So you don't want to do it too often because eventually you lose the quality of the mask. And the important thing is that the surface charge has to be reapplied before you use it again. And this has been done in our case with some kind of piezo. It looks like a gun. We just spread the surface charge on, but probably if this is to be done in a larger scale, there are other better options to do it. Clearly, because the production of FFP masks has improved in the months following the immediate shortages. Now this is not needed, but back then it was an interesting study to see whether this is possible. With this, I would like to conclude my talk. Thank you for your attention, and again, thank for all the colleagues, and I'll be happy to hear your questions.
Thank you very much, Anton. I'm going to just to check questions.
Yeah, I see one from.
That is one question here from Elena. Did you try other sterilization using UV light also as well?
Yes, so this is relevant. At the beginning, we tested several different ways. Actually, our colleagues we tried, we measured masks that were either irradiated with ultraviolet, and then there was hot steam treatment and I think peroxide treatment, but not all of those are appropriate for all of these masks. And in some cases, the masks decrease in performance. For example, for FFP masks, there are several layers. So if you just irradiate them with UV light, you will not reach deep enough, perhaps. Whereas the treatment with hot steam and so on, they can reduce the performance of the mask. So in our studies, those that we did systematically and we published something, we mostly focused on just on ionizing radiation, because that is thorough, like this goes through everything.
Thank you very much. I don't see any more questions. Yes, yes.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, here. Just a question, effect of humidity on filtration. Does it play some role?
Humidity and concentration. Well, I should say that our setup is, we did not control humidity. Like we used everything, our oral experiments took place in a special chamber, so the humidity was pretty much the same as the humidity outside. But I'm not sure if it influenced a lot because it, there was, the humidity was lower than you would have in, let's say, well, there was always there was air circulation, so let me think more.
It is a bit complicated to make such control test atmosphere. They do that the first time and do like it is now, and they do that with mannequin and.
Oh yeah, that definitely. I was thinking how we could actually monitor this in our setup, but pretty much this would include controlling humidity in the whole room with the circulation. So it's it would not be really trivial.
Yes, but I think what Pierluigi think about is when we exhale, we make it in dead space, very very humid. Atmosphere. So how it is?
It changes during time.
Yeah.
You start dry,
true.
and in short you have.
Yeah, it is all times, in inhalation and exhalation with humidity, with humid air, and then again. And it is interesting to test something like.
Also the model for Lydia.
Yeah.
How does it change?
Yeah.
Dry air or in hospitals very often I found a very dry air.
Yes, but here is, you know, situation when we breathe, that is
Inhale.
just in periods, inhalation and exhalation, and that total humidity.
True. Also, I should mention that we were not using actually air droplets, like water droplets. We were using quartz powder. So, yeah. So,
That's right.
yeah. I can afford this because I'm far from you, you know. No, I'm fine. It's just that I was in Lisbon the last week, so coming back home, the temperature is much lower, so I have to readjust. We even had some snow in the morning. So yeah, basically that's the idea. We were using quartz powder instead of water droplets, but even some testing methods for these standards, they're using like these silicone rubber spheres. So this again does not relate directly.
But they
But
also
definitely that's a relevant topic.
But also they have, you know, just flow, not in one direction. They didn't have breathing machine. For such things, it's necessary to have breathing machine that is not, it is have that inhalation, exhalation, humidity, and all such things to make it real. Okay, thank you very much, Anton. We are going with next presentation.